Hey friends, welcome to Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Clingenpeel. I don't know if you know this, but it is fall, y'all. That means pumpkin spice is back in the market. We have soccer and football. We have sweaters. But friends, most of you know that it is back to school time, which means that we might be having some struggles with our mama hearts, sending our kiddos off, or maybe there's some tensions at home because the littles are at home and their big siblings are back in school with their other friends. We know that this season can bring tensions, but can also be a lot of fun. And so today we're going to have some really cool conversations about how do we send our kids off into the school system? What about those that are sending their kids off for the first time to college? And that's me, friends. I just sent off my oldest to college yesterday. And so I was living vicariously through my Pinterest board. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. We all have dream boards on Pinterest, right? Setting up the dorm rooms. But honestly, it was a bit of a struggle. This is my first one sending off to school. It isn't just like sending to kindergarten, which, by the way, still ripped out my heart in that season as well. But there's something about bringing your child to school and then sending them off. Because now you're wondering, did I do everything I possibly could to prepare her for the real world? So, friends, we are going to have an amazing conversation today with Dr. Jim Burns. He knows all about sending adult children out into this world fully equipped and prepared to face it. So he's going to provide me wisdom because I am in the midst of this, but for all of you as well, that maybe you have littles at home and you could start implementing these things now so that you can raise them up to be fully encouraged and equipped to not only face the school systems, K through 12, but maybe they move on to college, trade school, or the armed services. So we want you to be encouraged today. So I hope our conversation brings that to you. So I would love to tell you a little bit more about Dr. Jim Burns. He is the amazing founder and president of HomeWord that is sponsoring this podcast, which is awesome. He's written a billion books. I might be exaggerating, but you can definitely find all of that on homeword.com as well as all major areas that sell books. But this gentleman, his biggest book right now that he loves to talk about is Doing Life with Your Adult Children. Some other ones I've implemented, especially those that have littles at home, is how do you talk about sexuality in a really easy, encouraging way with our kids, because that's one of the most awkward conversations, is it not? It's hard, but he guides you through that. He also writes books on confident parenting. He does talks across the world all about making sure that we are the best disciples of Jesus, but also raising kids to know Jesus as well. He is a husband as well as the father of 3 daughters, and I believe he has 4 grandchildren now. So he is living his best life, which is awesome. So join me now on this edition of Embracing Your Season with Dr. Jim Burns. Well, Dr. Jim Burns, I am so excited that you're here today. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, you know what? It is an absolute privilege. I smiled as you're giving that intro because it brought emotion to me thinking about my kids going off to college and me crying.
Right?
Kathy not crying, but me crying.
Yes.
So,
It's a different
I didn't
element,
expect
isn't
that.
it?
I mean, I cried at kindergarten too. I get it. I remember when Christy went to kindergarten, I was like a mess. But,
Yes.
the process of kind of preparing them to become adults is a tough one.
It really is. And I'm finding that even though I was like cognitively prepared for this,
Yeah.
like that's what we do, right? As parents, we are supposed to take these little beings that God has
Yeah.
blessed us with and equip them and nurture them and raise them up. But yet when it's actually happening,
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Did I have all the talks? And then you want to
Right.
shove it into the last week when you have them. You know what I mean? You're like, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Mom, I know this stuff. And I'm like, okay, you're right.
Right.
You're right. So
Right.
yeah, it is. It's hard. It's crazy, but it's also such a beautiful thing because they are
Yeah.
becoming what they're supposed to, right? We're supposed to raise them and send them out so that they can become what Jesus has designed them to be. But today, I would love to just hear your wisdom on how can we do this well. So let's just start with the first question of like, what are those important skills that parents need to make sure that their kiddos have? And I'm talking like raising them from their littles all the way up so that they know that they're equipped for this world.
Yeah, that is a great question. And we will never pass because you never get there. You know, I'm thinking now, I mean, my kids are in their 30s and I'm going, oh, wow, I should have had that conversation when they were 15. Should have had that. You know, I mean, so parents play the shoulda game. We
Mhm.
got to get out of that, actually, because again, most of your listeners are doing a pretty good job and their kids aren't perfect and they're not perfect. Here's
Mhm.
one of the things that's interesting is we have to understand that our kids don't know how to become adults and we don't know how to parent an adult. So, and again, I think this is good for even your younger parents who have younger kids. Uh, we have to relearn how to parent at each phase. So, when kids are 5, you talked about kindergarten. Well, we have to relearn. They're now going off into the world. We have a grandson, Huxley, who just went into TK. It's like a huge thing to my daughter, who's like, oh my gosh, he's gone now 5 days a week. This is
Right.
TK, but she's having emotional breakdowns because he's now not at home. And, I'm just
Mhm.
laughing at that now that
Mhm.
I've gone through that. But I get it. So, I think part of it is, what do you want to do? Take a step back, go 10,000 feet, and you go, you know what? Basically, and we say this at HomeWord all the time with whatever age of your kid, is you want to help them become responsible adults. And I'm going to add who love God. And that's
Mhm.
not easy and it's confusing. But even as kids go through that phase, you begin to help them become responsible. So it's not about raising obedient children. It's about raising kids who can become responsible as they get older. So in reality, you're preparing them to be responsible at each phase of life. And then when they do what you're doing, I knew your daughter was leaving just the other day.
Mhm.
And I went, oh, this is hard. That phase is so
Yeah.
hard. But
Yeah.
because you're going to think back and go, did I have that conversation? You said it so well, and so you jam them in there and they're like, hey,
Mhm.
take it easy here. Um, we got this. And then they kind of don't have it sometimes. And they call back and they're, calling mommy and saying, mommy, but this. And then other times they're going, mom, I'm an adult. Quit
Mhm.
bugging me and don't even give me that input. I totally get that. So anyway, to answer it, I honestly think there are a few key things. And one is that responsibility.
Mhm.
Because really, if they become you're raising someone to become a responsible adult. So you help them become responsible, and you do that by handing them over some of those responsibilities earlier. For example, you become a consultant when your kids are about 15. You become a consultant. Most of their day-to-day decisions are done by them, or should be done by them. And I'm not saying that all their decisions are the perfect ones either. That's what's hard as a parent. But we
Yes.
can't control, and so that act of saying, doing what you said with the Pinterest and then making a bunch of runs to Target or whatever and getting them their first own trash can, their first own,
Right.
bedspreads that are different or whatever it might be,
Yes.
that, that's not easy for the kid and it's not easy for, the parent.
Mhm.
But the planning happens earlier. The people who do, I think, have the hardest time are the people who were in control until they launched them into college. And if they were in total control, then they're going, oh my gosh, there's going
Right.
to be a crash there. And a lot of times, I'll be honest with you, there is a crash. So we
Mm.
see that sometimes with parents who have been super hyper, controlling or super hyper. I mean, they're good parents, but they're not letting their kids work through tech issues and, like,
Mhm.
even you talked earlier about sexuality issues or relationship issues, and then those kids get there and they don't know what to do. That's a
Exactly.
tougher thing.
Well,
So
and I think that's part of my struggle or tension in parenting is like I don't want to enable, I
yeah,
want to
yeah,
equip. But there's sometimes where I could see the anxiety in my kid's face. Like
yeah,
they don't want to do this. But it's also
right.
that mentality of like, I know if they're not doing it on their own, they're never going to learn. And so like a great example of this is like my daughter, we have a virus going through our
Sure.
house right now, which is per usual with starting school. And so I had several meetings that I couldn't miss. And so she's 17. I was like, you know what? You need to go to the doctor by yourself. This is the same child that doesn't go into the gas station to get a pop by herself. And I thought, oh Lord, this one's going to be hard. But you know what? I told her, I was like, girl, you're going to need antibiotics. I already know it because your brother had to. Like, you got to do this by yourself. And you know what? She was so much more
Yay.
confident after
Yeah.
she achieved that. She was
Right.
able to go in, she did it by herself, and it was awesome. It was great.
Yeah.
So if I would have taken away that opportunity from her,
Right.
think about that, then she would have never built confidence. And so maybe speak to this a little bit about like how can we balance the enabling versus the
Right. Right.
equipping as a
Well,
parent?
if we enable our kids, they become entitled and they have a failure to launch. It's just that simple. So your illustration is you get the A plus for momming in
Yes,
that.
let's go.
Because honestly, she has to do it. Here's the phrase: experience is a better teacher than advice. It's true for a 5-year-old. Don't touch that fire. They touch the fire, it burns. They're not going to do it again. So the experience of building confidence by going to the doctor, getting an antibiotic.
Right.
She went in there potentially, if she's the one who doesn't want to go get.
Yes.
It's so funny because here in California, it's not fall yet because it's summer. I'm in shorts. I've got a shirt on, but
yes,
and
enjoy.
B and B, when it comes to some of these things, like pop, we never use the word pop, but I know what you mean. I think you meant like we would call it a
Soda? What do you call
soda.
it? Soda. Oh
Soda.
no, it's definitely pop here in
No, I
Indiana.
know. I want to pop, and I'd like when I moved from California to New Jersey to go to grad school, and these people said, "Do you want to pop?" And I went, "What? I don't even know what you're talking
Were
about." I
you
honestly
confused?
thought it was a
Exactly.
lollipop. Yeah, but anyway, I get it. Thus, I digress. But again, for her if she was worried about that, then for her to go do the antibiotic was hard for her.
Yes,
But
it
now
was.
she feels better. She goes, I got this. I can do it. She knows how to do it. So as parents, sometimes we just have to let them do that. And sometimes what happens is, there really is a process of saying, here's how you do it. So you've taught her how to do it, and then she does it. And then you're right back. How did it go? And
Yep.
so you're kind of training. So, you use this term a lot because I listen to every podcast and you'll talk about discipling our children. Well, we think of discipleship as we're discipling them to know what unconditional love means in the scripture. Well, discipleship is here's how you go get antibiotics. Here's how you are going to make the bed. Hopefully you'll make it once or twice a week in college if it's that kid. I was that kid. I didn't make my bed. And so again we have to help them. And so they do it, and then you watch, and then they finally do it and they're confident, and it's not the issue for the next year.
And I would also add on, like, even though it's uncomfortable when our kids fail, like, we need
Yeah.
to allow them to fail. So even if
Yeah.
she said, like, I can't go, I mean,
Right.
granted, I would not let her sit in the whatever illness she had. I would eventually stepped in, but it's the reality of the natural consequences.
Yeah.
That's also the teacher, right? So if our
Yeah.
kids continue to decide not to maybe do something, we can't
Right.
step in every single time because, as you said, that experience is a teacher, and it's a natural consequence to choices, even the
Well,
ones that you choose not to step in
Well,
of.
I love the word natural consequence because, again, sometimes we use it and you would know this totally. We'll talk about with kids who are struggling with something, tough love. But tough love is a natural consequence. It's just allowing the consequence of a poor choice or allowing the consequence of not going to the doctor to take place because that's how they're going to learn.
Yeah.
And so we who want to come in and save everybody, I want to take care of my girls, so I'm going to, do it all for them. That's not helpful to them to become responsible adults. So then what happens long term? We're not thinking about long term. Some of us are just trying to think about how do I get through Wednesday?
Yep.
I get it. But long term, it becomes, oh my gosh, um, I'm still doing this stuff. I'm still taking care of them in college. I'm still making their pediatric appointments. Why they're at the pediatrician, I have no idea. And, I'm still reminding them to brush their teeth and floss. Well, we got to, we got to get past that.
Yep, I agree. And it just reminds me of my own kiddos. Like, we have the 4, and so my youngest is in 6th grade,
Yeah.
and my olders even point out sometimes, "You would never have let me get away with that when I was that age." And you're
Right.
like, "Oh my gosh, you're so right." And so
Yeah.
what a good reminder that
Right.
we have to let go. We got to allow our
Yeah.
kids to
Yeah.
do that. But speaking to, like, our older kids that maybe they're
Yeah.
in high school and they're making, you said consultation, that's more of a role. So how do we as parents begin that process of letting go as they transition as they get older?
Yeah. Well, again, it's not easy to give up control, and control is the issue for us a lot of times. But I think when we have in our head, we're going to learn this by, first I think the stage is like about age, 11, 12, 13. Now we're kind of coaching them. So we're still in control. We're still, coaches take them on a timeout if it's that kind of a sport, or coach with the dances, teaching them certain things and saying, why don't you take a rest here or do this? So, it's not like we're totally in control. But if we just did control all the way until their adulthood, then that's a harder thing. So you coach, and then you consult. So I think you do 4 steps, forward and 3 steps backwards, because we're gonna all, but then when you get to know it, just like learning anything, once you kind of figure it out, it becomes, secondhand. I remember learning how to drive. I was petrified with certain things, and today I don't remember. Today, I drove from my office to the studio. I mean, from my house to the studio, which is where my office is too, and I don't even remember doing it. I know I did. I looked. There was the high school is back in school, of course. So I looked and went, "Oh, how cool! The kids are here." But I don't remember driving. I don't remember stopping at a stop sign. It just became natural. Well, that's what you really want with your kids, but you do that by doing it over and over and over again. And so it's not sexy, it's not easy, it's not a magic wand. It's helping them make those right and wise decisions as it goes.
And I think there's something about just releasing them and surrendering them to the
Yeah,
Lord and just saying,
yeah,
like, my God loves them more than even I do.
right,
And we could
right.
just lay them at
Yeah,
his feet. I mean,
yeah,
I've had to do that a lot recently. And even just like with my kiddo no longer being in my household, like I can't have those necessarily
yeah.
like check-ins every night. Although, let me tell you, she's requested Snapchat communication. Do you know that now
Yay.
I'm trying to become a pro in Snapchat? Like, it is not for me, although the filters I do enjoy. But it's like
Right.
learning all of these ways to continue to
Sure.
surrender her every single
Yeah.
day. And so,
Mm,
one of the things about our kids know Jesus, I hope that they continue to follow him as their Lord, but
mhm.
like
Right.
she's outside of my home now. And so, how
Yeah.
can we as parents help solidify that relationship
Yeah.
while they're in our homes, but also
Yeah.
releasing them as they get out?
Yeah. Well, part of it is, I mean, this sounds overly spiritual maybe, but I think it's a prayer of relinquishment on a regular basis. I have said a
Mm.
prayer, and I honestly said it this morning. It just happened. I forgot we were even talking about this subject, early this morning. And I just said, Lord, I relinquish my children. I relinquish my grandchildren to you. You're in control. That's a prayer to God. It's also a reminder to me that I need to do that, right?
Mm.
It's kind of a twofold prayer. God, take them. And God, would you remind me that I'm supposed to let you take them because I'm worrying about this one right now, or, whatever it might be. We have a daughter who literally, as I'm speaking, is flying to Venice, Italy. Not a bad trip with her
Wow,
husband.
fun.
It's awesome. But she's going to be in another country, and here she's 37 years old. You'd think I would not be worrying about her, but I'm like, I hope they figure out how to get from the airport to Venice, and did I tell her that she could actually take a water taxi and it'd be, I'm thinking this morning, going, you know what, she's going to figure this out.
That's
She
right.
traveled with me for 4 years when I was speaking and worked with me, so she'll figure it out. But
Mhm.
that was my worry. I
Mhm.
think that's going to be for all of our lives. We just have to live with that. But again, it's this idea of relinquishing them. And relinquish it means when your daughter is going to college, she is now an adult. She is not always acting like an adult. She doesn't have,
Yeah.
you're still, worrying about certain things. But basically, what you're doing is giving her the passport to adulthood. I think
Mm.
it's important for a mom and a dad to do that. To literally, almost sometimes, I'm not opposed at all of having rites of passages. Now that you're an adult, here you go.
Yeah, I love that.
But I honestly think it's a beautiful illustration of the passport to adulthood, because we have to do that, not them. And that means we have to reinvent the relationship. So with parents, this is where we roll up our sleeves and say, okay, this is going to be hard for them, but it's also going to be hard for us. So a lot more, and we're learning it through the college military. You mentioned all the different ways you can, once you're out of high school. But I think it's maybe even harder for us, but we have to figure out, how do we relinquish them? How do we reinvent the relationship?
Mhm.
And again, realizing that sometimes they don't want that relationship to be reinvented because they want us to still do stuff for them.
Yeah.
And in today's world, you have some kids who, I was the kid in college who was supposed to call my mom and dad on Sunday. I would call collect because, of course, we didn't have cell
Oh,
phones, all that kind of stuff.
wow,
I'm an old guy.
yes.
And I would forget on some Sundays, and I thought, I wonder if my parents would do what Kathy and I do. We'd be sitting around waiting for that call, and I was
Mhm.
playing basketball, or I was hanging out with my friends, or whatever I was doing, and I would forget to do that. With our kids, so obviously with this generation of kids even more so, texting, you're talking about, Snapchat,
Snapchat,
anything.
yeah.
We're constantly with them, so we have to be careful to not be as constantly with them, and
Mm.
nobody wants that. I mean, we want them to be in touch with us 6 times a day. That may not be best for them. And that's hard for a parent to understand, that just like our kids, when they become young adults, they don't answer our text all the time or answer our phone calls all the time. We sometimes have to say, you know what, honey, I can call you at 7 when I'm done with dinner or whatever it might be, instead of
Mm.
coming right back. Now, again, first week of school, please do whatever they need. Follow them around if you have to, in terms of whatever they need, social media, whatever they need with texting or whatever, DMing,
Mhm.
anything. But as time goes on, we have to build boundaries too. And what I like to say is, as their life begins as an adult and they have fresh and new experiences, follow their lead. So as parents, even with littles in the house, you have this perfect illustration with where your kids are. There's still some things that now, you follow their lead with some new experiences and even new ways of parenting them. And it's the first time I said to one of my daughters, hey, can I call you at 7 instead of right then? I felt bad. I don't think they even felt bad. They were like, sure, that works great for me. But for me, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm rejecting my daughter. Is she going to be okay? She's probably going to
Mm.
go do drugs and move in with a boyfriend that she doesn't have. So I'm
Mhm.
panicked because I didn't answer the call, interrupt everything else I was doing. But it was actually a discipline for me to live that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned something about like doing parenting different, with
Mhm.
maybe the younger ones. Well, it just makes me think that each child is uniquely created.
Yeah.
Their personalities are different. And
Yeah.
so I know that the child that I just sent off to college, she may need more
Yeah.
check-ins,
Yeah.
than maybe
Right.
some of my other kiddos.
Right.
And as they've illustrated that the way that we raise my youngest is very different than the way that we raise them,
Right.
good or bad, I'm not so sure. I guess we'll see as he gets
My
older.
brother still talks about that. He's 81 years old and he still says, I was the youngest.
You were the favorite, right?
Exactly. I think so anyway. All favorites think that. So my brother is like, you were raised by different parents, you know,
Yes, it's so
and
true.
yeah. But you're right. I call that personally tailored parenting. So each child, we have to learn how to personally tailor the way we parent them, and no other sibling thinks it's fair. They're
Yeah,
just going to,
true.
and they're going to let you know. But you bought for us with all daughters, you bought a $38 sweater. I don't know if they even have $38 sweaters anymore. You bought a $38 sweater for Heidi, and my sweater was only cost 26.
Oh my
Can I have the
goodness,
change?
yes.
That honestly is a quote from one of my kids. I'm like, you have to be kidding me. But that was the sweater you wanted. I know, but I didn't know I could get a $38 sweater. Give me a break.
Right. And I think this is such a good illustration for us to be reminded that we are uniquely
Yeah.
created, that we are
Right.
all different parts of the body, and that we
Right.
do have to respond as parents
Yeah.
differently per the
Right.
child's needs. And that's
Right.
that explanation of like, it's not about equality. It's about like, how can we meet each other's needs in a
Right.
healthy way? Not
Yes.
spoiling, but healthy meeting of the needs. And
Right.
so as we're just learning, and as you indicated, like I'm a very different parent now because I've
Yeah.
lived life. My kids
Sure.
have transitioned in different seasons. And
Right.
now the way that I even give wisdom to other people of like, hey, listen, make sure you get the sippy cup that has the least amount of items in it. Because let me tell you, you have to clean every item and it's a pain. Like those are words of wisdom that I know now, like 20 plus years later. So it's like the way that we view the world is different. And that,
That's so true.
it just brings up good wisdom of finding other people who've already gone through it. Like,
Yeah. And by the way, I just took a note on that because we have grandkids now, and our 2-year-old
oh,
needs a different sippy cup than we have.
yes.
So you changed my life, Paige.
It
Thank you for
is.
that.
It is so like just make your life easier as friends.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have the best, biggest, whatever, just make
Yeah.
it easier. But that goes to show the next point is the fact that we all need mentors in our life. We
Yeah.
all need people who have already
Yeah.
navigated these
Yes.
seasons so that they can pour into us to give us the it's going to
Right.
be okay or you're going to
Right.
get through it. And so just finding that encouragement and this is the other thing that I've really pointed out with Faith is that with my kids, I even asked Haley, my oldest, would you like me to help you find a church? And she's luckily we are so honest in our house. She goes, Mom, I want to say yes. I do, but I don't know if I really want that right now. And I was like,
I
you know
love
what?
her.
Thank you so much for being honest.
No.
But here's what I also did. I was like, when that conversation happens, believe me, I have already screenshot. I know where the Bible studies are happening. Like
So
I know
that
where
was
this
us.
church is at. Like
Right.
when she is ready for this, I'll be like, oh
Right.
girl, you know what? It's Wednesday night at 9 p.m. in the Commons, like we're ready for it.
So good.
Right? This
Everybody
is the
goes
way we're
through that. Yeah.
doing. Yeah.
And
And
I love your
so
daughter for saying that, because actually that's a really
yes,
healthy sign. She
I
was
believe
saying,
it.
I got this. And
Yep.
if I need your help, I'll call on it. And she knows
And
you have
that's
probably
That's part
screenshotted
of the
and
preparation, like the
yeah,
preparation, right? It's like,
yeah,
I know that girl knows the Lord. I know that we've had those hard conversations. Like we
right,
have really talked about truth, but it also means that she's going to have her own real,
right,
authentic relationship with Jesus. And
right,
that may not mean right now that she is going to get in church every day or
right,
she's going to be at the Bible study every Wednesday,
right.
but you better believe that she's going to call me up and say, Mom, I'm really struggling. And I will send her a Bible. Like this morning, for instance, Isaiah 43, where it says, I
Hmm.
am doing a new thing in you. Like the Lord brought that
Oh,
to
love
mind.
that.
And
Love that.
she sent it back to me. She goes, Mom, this was perfect. Thank you.
Yay.
So it's like those little like
Hmm.
touch points of adding that faith relationship in your
Yeah.
conversation, I think is so big. So it was
No,
very
that
valuable.
was a very natural way of doing it. Again, I think so highly of how you even parent. I know you're one of the most incredible, talented podcast people and communicators at your
Thank
church and
you.
counselors. But I also think you're a great parent because that was really good for us to hear. Don't send her 9 scripture verses as much as you
Yeah.
might want to. You sent one, it was really appropriate. She wrote back.
Mm,
And then parents, when we do that and our kids don't write anything back, it doesn't mean that they hate you or hate God. They just maybe went, cool, but they didn't respond. And that's where we have to be careful because sometimes we're looking for that response. You got one. How
yeah,
awesome
that's
is
good.
that?
Yeah.
But there may be another time where you're not going to get one. You're going to go, oh my gosh, she's probably, doing drugs because she didn't
Mhm.
respond to my Bible verse. That's not
Right.
the case.
Yeah, don't allow the fear and all of those things to
Sure.
come in, just
Sure.
like let them do
Right.
what they're supposed to do, which is
Ex-
to kind of create their own life right now.
Exactly.
So, I would love to switch gears a little bit and talk about marriages because
Hmm.
when kids
Yeah.
transition, whether it's even from they were home all the time and now they're in
Hmm.
kindergarten 5 days a
Right.
week, or
Right.
now they're out of the house altogether, like that adds some different dynamics to the
Yeah.
marriage relationship. So,
Yeah.
any suggestions or
Yeah.
encouragement how we can continue to pour into our
Yeah.
marriages?
Well, it means we have to be very disciplined because when our kids are younger, or even when our kids are teenagers, one of the things we find is that marital satisfaction goes down. Uh, for example, when a baby comes to the world, 69% of men say that their marital satisfaction went down, and 49% of women. That doesn't mean that
Mm,
they don't love the baby, and that doesn't mean that. But what part of that means is that now there's someone else in there. So as our kids get, we actually have a chance to work on our marriages as our kids get older, because we've probably buried some things under the mat and whatnot. So to me, it means some discipline. For example, I ask people at our marriage conferences at HomeWord, I always ask them same question every time. How many of you would be willing to give 1% of your time each week to your marriage? And they all put their hands up. And then if they don't, I call them out and I go, are you honestly not willing to give your wife 1%? And the guy goes, oh yeah,
1%.
I put my head up. It's funny. But that's 90 minutes actually. And so then
Mm,
I say, would you be willing to have a date night? And because what we find is that when couples have a date night where they're not just talking about their parents, and I mean, this is basic marriage stuff, but the marital satisfaction goes up. And
yeah.
I found that Kathy and I would get in a rut. We made a decision early on before we had kids to start doing date nights. I'm so great. I don't know that we would be married if we didn't have that. And we made a decision as kids came in that we would continue that. And it was hard. Sometimes we couldn't find babysitting. And so we would put the kids to bed. I being a youth pastor type guy, I would move the clock earlier and go, okay, yeah, it's 7:30,
So
guys. They're going,
smart.
why is the sun still out? Kind of thing. But then we would have Chinese food and kind of cuddle on the couch and just be disciplined not to do the work, not get on the screens, whatever. That's easier now that I'm in an empty nest, but it's
Mm,
still a discipline to have those things. But they say that when you do that, you have more marital satisfaction praying together. Here's a fascinating thing, Paige, and some people think this is an urban legend, but I've actually seen the statistics. It was done in a non-Christian way. It was Columbia University. But let's say marriage is 1 out of 2 divorces. I mean, who's going to get on an airplane? I'm going to be speaking here this weekend. And if I said to the people, hey, come back to California with me, get on an airplane, but there's a 50% chance that the airplane's going to crash, nobody's going to come with me. I'm not even going to get on the airplane, right?
no kidding.
But
Yes.
that's what we're doing with marriages. However, statistics show that if someone prays, a couple prays together and on a very regular basis, that there is a 1,100 chance of a marriage crashing. That doesn't mean the marriage is perfect. I'm here to say that. I mean, Kathy and I have been married a long time, and we now pray together every day. We didn't at the beginning, and I'm not saying every time we pray. I mean, I've prayed and preached at her during the prayer, or she's prayed and preached at me, which is not wise. Please don't do that.
Yeah,
No,
no
no, no,
doubt.
no. But, I've prayed with a poor spirit about it because we were in, some kind of a frustration or whatever. But the point I'm saying is that helps our spiritual intimacy. We talk about physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, but one of the least developed areas is spiritual intimacy. And that's an easy thing to do. Now, some of your listeners go, yeah, but there's no way my husband is going to pray or my wife is going to pray because that's not their deal. I get it. I'm not saying force them and then become toxic and all that.
Mhm,
But I am
mhm.
saying that do what it takes to keep growing because, I'm now in the empty nest. I started doing math going, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in the empty nest longer than raising kids for a couple of decades.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so
Yeah.
with that in mind, I had better start putting energy into our marriage because, we love each other. We take each other for granted. We're playing taxi driver and we needed a computer printout for our kids' activities and things. And all of a sudden now we're like twiddling our thumbs going, so what are we going to do? And I don't want to be the guy like in the movie City Slicker who's going, yeah, now what we do in the empty nest is we walk around the mall looking for the best soft yogurt, mumbling, why don't the kids call? you know. And so that means people who haven't prepared for that in their marriages, the only demographic where divorce is right now going higher is the demographic of what they call the graying of divorce, 50 years and older.
Mm.
Part of that is because they finally got the kids out of the house, or, a lot of people, depending on what their age level is, it changes. But ours wasn't at 50, I'll tell you that much. But the point being, it's important to keep working on our marriage. Do the disciplines. And again, there's marriage is wonderful. And we talk about romance and spontaneity. And it's all right. It's beautiful. But we also have the discipline of doing marriage right. And that's what you do.
I love the fact that you call it a discipline because there are
Mhm.
some times where I I personally, all I wanna do is just go home and read a
Yeah.
book and be by myself. But the
Right.
reality is that I know that Ryan and I have spent so much time investing in our full-time job or in our kids that we haven't even really spoken to each other. And so there's so
Right.
much value of being intentional and
Mhm.
disciplined about setting
Yeah.
that time aside because that's what matters, as you indicated. It's so important
Right.
that we do that.
Right. And you need time to read a book, and Ryan
Yeah.
needs time to do whatever he's going to do. But the point being is if we don't, if we, that's a rut. And plus that
Mhm.
I mean, when we do what meets our needs, sometimes it's not what meets their needs. So we need so I find I want to read a book right now. No, we have a date. So we're going last night. We went out. It wasn't fancy, but we went out for Mexican food. We went to one of our favorite places. And you know what? It ended up, I was like, oh my gosh, why don't we just eat at home? Honestly, I would have a can of soup. I am so tired. And instead but it was a date. We had an appointment. So we went, and you know what?
Mhm.
We laughed and we talked, and it's very familiar because this place is familiar. And I don't think you should do that every time. But we closed the place down, which is hilarious because like that's not usually us. But the guy is like, "So we're closing now. Are you guys finished with your plates?" And he takes the plates. And we're talking like a divey Mexican restaurant. We're not
Wow.
we're
That's
not
awesome.
great food, but yeah. But what I'm saying is because we did that, we were better off. And interesting enough, when we came back home and I started to go right back to my computer because of all the stuff I was going through and wanting to deal with things,
Mm.
I went, that can happen in the morning. And I just set it aside. And, Kathy and I had we continued
Mm.
our date, so to speak. It was good.
Yeah, and that connection, right? It's all about,
Right.
reminding ourselves of the connection that we have with our spouse,
Yeah.
and that is
Yeah.
just intentional time with one another, and as you
Right. Right.
indicated, it's not necessarily like the super in-depth date night where everything is exciting, but maybe it's more of
No.
like you have a really, fun but in-depth
Right.
conversation about your week and what God's teaching you or what you learned at work or who
Right.
you had maybe a conflict with. Like, those are
Right.
all
Right.
building connection and intimacy, and that is the
Yeah.
sustainability of a
Yeah.
relationship.
And you say
Yeah.
it, connection. I mean, intimacy means connection. And so we think
Mhm.
of intimacy. Guys sometimes think only physical intimacy. Women understand it better in terms of emotional intimacy and whatnot, but it's connection. To
Mhm.
do that, you have to persevere. You have to be intentional. And not that's stuff we don't talk about in marriage because we expect I want it to be spontaneous and romantic at all moments. And it's just not,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as we conclude this amazing conversation, I would love for you to just leave the parents who are in all different seasons of life, in their marriage, but also with their kiddos. Like, what's some encouragement to remind
Yeah.
them that they are doing good work, but also like getting ready, to equip their kids to head on
Yeah.
out?
Well, it's in the long run, and sometimes when you're training for an event. I ran a marathon a while back, like 10 years ago. But when I ran that marathon, the training wasn't all that fun, but finishing it was really cool, and
Mm,
and I felt good about myself and whatnot. So the part that you're in right now, if your kids aren't released, the part that you're in right now, part of that is training and discipline and some hard work, but make sure that you take time to have serious fun with your spouse. Make sure that you have time to have serious fun with your kids, because those are things that they're going to remember. Build traditions. Um, Put your computer away. Take your phone and put it aside, and play a browsing game of, depending on the age of your kids, whatever it is. We're right now into Candyland with our grandkids.
oh,
And
sure.
I
Yeah.
and I wonder, I don't know when Candyland happened, but it might have been. I know I played it with my kids, and these new grandkids are like, "This is awesome." They don't know it's an old game, but just those things I think really make a difference, because you're in it for the long haul, and know that you don't have to stay that way. And you mentioned the word mentors. The other thing I would just simply say is find people who can help you, who have already passed whatever stage you're in. So, like for you right now, some of the women, some of the men that who have already, sent their kids off to college. Not that you still have kids at home, so you need mentors for
Hmm.
this too. But who have said you're going to get some great ideas, because they're going to go, oh wow, we do a FaceTime every Thursday night with everybody with the family, and we tell a joke, whatever it might be, you know. But somebody else says, you know what, I'm actually doing a Zoom Bible study with my daughter, and she wants to do that. Awesome. Do it,
Mm,
whatever it is. But
yeah.
we don't learn that just by knowing. We learn that by other people, where we get good advice. And the Bible says, where there's no counsel, the people fall. In the multitude of counselors, there is safety. Hopefully, our conversation is like that. Hopefully, when somebody comes into your office and has a counseling appointment, that's the case. But it's also us finding mentors along the way who have done it. One of the secrets to, I think, our happiness is that we have mentors. We had lunch 2 days ago with a couple who's over 80, and they're just amazing people. And Kathy and I went, are we blessed or what to be able to,
Oh, that's
hang out
awesome.
with these people? Um, because we kind of imitate them. I know it says, follow Jesus, and we do, but these are amazing Jesus followers. And sometimes we go, we're going to follow Terry and Sharon, because they have skin, and they have 3 kids, and they've done an amazing job with it. Yeah.
Yeah, so good. Well, Dr. Jim Burns, it's always a pleasure to have you on the
Yeah.
show with such wisdom and just graciousness and just funny stories too. I mean, you always bring it. You've lived life, and we appreciate any
Yeah.
wisdom that you share with us. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for what you're doing. Embracing Your Season is a great podcast. Great job.
Hey, friends, I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Jim Burns. I mean, come on, the wisdom that man has. And you can find all of his information on the show notes. So make sure you check that out as well. Regardless of whatever season you are in, he has written literally the book on it. So take a moment and check that out. Of course, you can find all the other resources on homeword.com as well. So let's talk a little bit about my takeaways. Because again, I'm having this conversation selfishly because my kiddos are transitioning in all different seasons of life right now, whether it's entering middle school for the first time for my youngest to my oldest going to college. These are all things I ask myself, have I fully prepared them for the real world? And honestly, most of the time, I probably haven't done everything and I probably haven't done everything perfectly, but that is okay because here is where I just surrender it to the Lord, knowing that He pursues my kids even more than I do, that He loves them, that He has a plan for them. And that's one of my takeaways is friends, we have to surrender our kids to Jesus because He knows the future. He has good in store for them. And they ultimately need their own authentic personal relationship with Him. And it's going to take living life to make that happen. Think of your own spiritual life. How did the Holy Spirit pursue you? I know for me, I became a believer when I was 17 years old, but it took probably a couple decades for me to realize that Jesus wasn't necessarily my Lord. And I had to go through a really hard season for me to truly surrender everything to Him to make sure that I was living the calling that He's put on my life. So, point number one, surrender your kids to the Lord. Another thing that Dr. Jim Burns pointed out is teaching our kids responsibility. Now, this is a cool thing, friends, that you have littles at home right now. I know that it is so much easier to turn off the tantrum by giving them what they're requesting in that moment, but stand firm, because if you give in now, that's potentially going to create, well, a literal monster in your home. We need to provide our kids the resilience, and they can only learn that through experience. So give them the moment to learn natural consequence. Help them understand that they will make a choice that will ultimately educate or equip them or empower them as they move to an older season of life where maybe they're experiencing something different. But the point is, we get to move and transition as well as a parent. So not only in the beginning are we really next to them, helping them navigate, but as they get older, help release some of that control so they can learn some of the responsibility on their own. Let's try to understand the difference between enabling and equipping. And then finally, one of the big takeaways is marriage. Friends, I get it. I have 4 kiddos in my house. We are constantly busy with activities, and I love it. This season is one of my favorite, with teens and activities and friends. We have their friends over all the time. We try to make our house the cool house, so we have all the kids over so we can have these conversations. But we have to be mindful is that, and I loved how Dr. Jim said this. He's like, you are going to be in the empty nest stage longer than the parenting stage. So let's be intentional about balancing our time. Absolutely. Pour into our kids, pour into our kids' friends, maybe even their families, but also recognize that you have a marriage. And if you are married, pouring into your marriage relationship and being intentional about that. Now, for those people that are out there that maybe they're not in a season of marriage, I want to really encourage you that this is also a season of self-care, that you are taking time of pouring into yourself. I'm not sure what that looks like for you. For me, it is watching the Great British Baking Show, reading a book, and lighting my favorite candle. I mean, and hanging out with my favorite kid, which is also my dog, Bauer. And my kids know that, so there's no shame. They know he's my favorite kid. So whatever it is, make sure you're pouring into yourself, being mindful that you have great value. And in order to pour out, you have to pour in. And for those of you who are married, make sure you are spending intentional time, having date nights, maybe not super exaggerant. Oh, I can't say the word. Maybe not super elaborate, but maybe it's more like Dr. Jim said. He was like, put the kids to bed and you have Chinese on the couch, or in my case, pizza rolls, and we're watching a movie together. Like, these are little times that we are going to be intentional and having that connection with the one that we have chosen to spend and partner with for the rest of our lives. So friends, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. We love that you join us every single week. Make sure you check out every episode that you have missed already. You can find them on every major podcast platform. And of course, we also have the HomeWord YouTube channel, so make sure you check that out as well. Well, we'd love to see you again next week for another edition of Embracing Your Season.